All right, our children, kinder through fifth, are headed out to kids' church. And so pray for them and our workers as I get to love on them today. Thank you, worship team, for helping us put our focus on Him and our words, our minds, attention. And one of my prayers this morning as I'm walking up here, I remember Dr. Bob, my professor at ETBU, he used to always make this statement, let it be thus saith the Lord and not thus saith Rusty. Like Father, empty me of self in this moment as we come. And so much of it's hard to come and preach because God has created us uniquely in His image and given us personalities, the good and the bad and the ugly. But it's who we are, that we bring all of us to Him and we give that to Him. And so this morning we're looking at one of these what if kind of questions. What if I care more about wealth than God? Thinking about wealth this week, one of the questions that comes to my mind is, what if I won the lottery? Any of y'all ever asked that question? Have you ever thought about what you would do if you won the lottery? Yeah, okay, how much money would you spend on yourself? What family member would you buy houses for? Would you put your... we think through that. I mean, we've all played that game, or maybe not. Maybe it's just me. But I played that game on many occasions. But I remember back when I was in junior high, we were visiting a family member. We were in Illinois. And so this is back in the 80s. And they had one of those Pick 6 lottery tickets. And so at that time, I got $5 allowance. And so my relatives talked me into, hey, you should buy some lottery tickets. You might win. And so they took my $5 of allowance and traded it on these Pick 5s or Pick 6s. And I remember watching the news at night. Those little balls came out. I was going to be a millionaire. Yeah, I lost my allowance. And so when I think about that and that foolish decision, because we all chase after that, hey, that quick, easy way to make money because we want to be rich. But the reality is everybody in this room is filthy rich. You know this, right? As Americans, if you make $50,000 a year, you're in the top 1% of rich people in the world. Because the average median family in today's economy makes $2,800 per year. That's the median. So over half of the world, some less than 4 billion people make less than that. About 1.2 billion make $3 per day. And so when you think about buying this lottery ticket, we're just wasting money. But we are rich. And so this morning we're going to look in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 12. If you have your Bibles, I encourage you to turn there. Maybe you're already there, verse 13. We're looking here at this parable of the rich fool. But as we get there to read this story, we think about the context. If you look back over at the beginning of chapter 12, Jesus is surrounded by a crowd of people. It says numbering in the thousands. And this crowd is so large that they are trampling upon one another. And Jesus is talking to his followers on a couple different things, on the hypocrisy, the Pharisees, about fear, about acknowledging Christ before men. When all of a sudden somebody in the crowd hollers out to Jesus. Let's read together verse 13. It says, someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Man, who made me a judge or arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions." And he told them a parable, saying, the land of a rich man produced plentifully. And he thought to himself, what shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns. I will build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, fool, this night your soul is required of you. And the things you're prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up a treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. So this random person in the crowd seizes the opportunity. Jesus is there. He's a rabbi to set the record straight with his brother. His brother is obviously the older one who gets by Jewish law, double portion of the inheritance, and it's his job to make sure all the siblings get their share. And so obviously this guy is not taking care of business, and he's like, where's mine? So it makes you think back to the prodigal son too. You've got this younger brother who's like, hey, I want my inheritance now, Dad. I wish you were dead. I want mine. I mean, that's this human nature of, it's like we want things, we want money. And so Jesus does not take the bait for this brother asking the question, because Jesus didn't come to make bad people, this older brother, good. He came to make dead people live. So he had a different agenda. This brother he had a heart problem. He was coveting, what his brother had and the possessions, and he wanted his cut. That whole phrase, the one who dies with the most toys wins. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but it's just not true. This son this brother wants his cut of the inheritance. And have you ever coveted? You ever been on social media? Then you've coveted. Because when we look on there, you see somebody else's new car. Their kid who got all A's, which is all of y'all, right? Their kid who hits the grand slam. Their vacation. And then you covet. And it's like, I wish I had that. And it's interesting as I think back to the 10 Commandments. When you think about those, I'm always mindful of, don't lie, don't steal, don't kill. But I forget that number 10 is what? Do not covet. And you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, and you shall not desire your neighbor's house, his field, or his male servant, or his female servant, his ox or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's. The brother here is coveting his older brother's inheritance. He wants it now. He wants it all. He wants something that's even his. But when you think about coveting is one of those gateway sins, because when you covet, sometimes it leads to stealing. And when you covet, sometimes it leads to lying. Sometimes it leads to adultery. Sometimes it leads to murder. And so you think about the power of what it means to covet something that God said, hey, do not covet. That's one of these 10 Commandments. And I remember hearing a preacher make this comment a couple of years, talking about coveting and talking about jealousy when you want something that's not yours. He said, if you are struggling with this particular issue, when you see something that somebody else has, and you're like, man, I wish I had that, go ask them about it. Say, tell me about your kid. Tell me about your new car. Tell me about your vacation. Celebrate what God has done. Instead of being jealous, instead of coveting, celebrate with them. And I went, man, that's how you take the sting out of it. So they're going, man, just go celebrate with them the goodness that God has blessed them with. But in this particular moment, as we're looking at this particular man who hollers out, says, hey, give me my inheritance. Jesus says, take care and be on guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist of the abundance of possessions. And so Jesus, like always, tells a story, tells a parable, this earthly story with a heavenly meaning. And one of the challenges about these types of stories is we want to go and analyze all the details of it and go what this means and what this means. But Jesus was trying to make one point, and his main point. And so let's see, as we look at this and as we read about the crops that basically they grew plentifully. Who makes crops grow? Not the rich guy. But God made his crops grow, and so he has all of this stuff, and he already has full barns full of grain. He's rich. And so, but he thinks of himself as like, hey, I need even more space to store. I need more bank accounts, more barns to put everything. And so this guy just misses it. And so we really see 3 lessons we need to learn from this rich man. The first lesson is he was greedy. Although the crops grew like crazy and he had more than he could have asked for, and he did start to ask a good question. You see it there. He says, what shall I do? That's a good question. God, what shall I do? We talked about that with, winning, the lottery. Hey, what should I do with it, God? What time of season is this year financially? It is income tax season. So how many of you got a return? I got a return this year. I've had to pay the past couple of years, and I was expected to pay, and it was like we felt like we won the lottery. Just because not having to pay Uncle Sam, it was pretty awesome. But when you get that unexpected blessing, what do we do with that? Do we ask God, hey, or I've already got my list of things that I want to do. I soon got that letter in the mail that says, hey, your escrow shortage. But God, you're so good that you gave us this. You knew it was coming. But one of the things that God has taught me about finances, and it's all a journey, and I'm sure we're all on this journey together, but is that we are blessed to be a blessing to others. I mean, because you have all these resources doesn't mean we just get to keep building bigger barns that greedy and have more bank accounts. And the goal is God has blessed us to be a blessing. And when you think back to Genesis 12, when God chose Abraham, he didn't just choose Abraham because he liked him. It's like, hey, I want to have this one guy who's my fave. But he says, hey, Abraham, you're going to be a blessing. I'm going to make you into a nation. And the nation of Israel is going to be a blessing to all the other nations. It wasn't just so that Israel could be a special people, but God wanted Abraham and Israel to be this nation that when the world looked at Israel, it would point people to God, to go, man, there's something different. And so when you think about the money, the resources, your home, your car, that's one of the things that I remember through the years of youth ministry is like, hey, God, our car is yours. We can use it for youth trips. I remember one time on Mission Arlington, the teenagers didn't tightly put on the lid to 5 gallons of red Gatorade. Yeah, so luckily it was gray carpet, but it's just a car. And so the thing is, all those things we have, money, car, houses, I mean, it's all the Lord. So when you think about that Genesis 12, and when we think about Matthew 5 and the Sermon on the Mount, God says, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father who is in heaven. We are blessed to be a blessing to others, and this rich man forgot that. So instead of thinking, hey, God has blessed me with this, are any of my neighbors hungry? Are any of my neighbors in need? He didn't even ask that question. He just asked the question where he says, what shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. He was more concerned about, hey, I don't have enough storage space to keep all of that stuff. Like one of those TV shows, Hoarders, where we just, maybe you're going, that's me. I mean, your house is full of stuff. One of the blessings of Hurricane Harvey, and one of the funny parts of Hurricane Harvey was a couple of weeks prior to Hurricane Harvey, Michelle and I were putting things up in the attic for a garage sale. The stuff you put in your attic is the stuff you don't want, right? So all the stuff we didn't want survived. Everything that we cared about flooded. And, we lost some. I mean, probably the most emotional thing we lost was all Michelle's, high school memorabilia, the things that you keep, all those things, the awards and stuff, and all the love letters I wrote. Yes. Oh, I appreciate that. Y'all feel deeply with me. But at the end of the day, it's just stuff. We don't take that with us. They're great memories and moments, but I think about God's sense of humor during Harvey as we just lost stuff, and he put back together our home in a way that hopefully points people to him. I know that our kids, we got to see God's hand firsthand put back together our home, not having flood insurance like so many did. God was very gracious to us. When I think back to giving and to generosity, when I was at East Texas Baptist University, over in Longview, there's another university called LeTourneau University. I know some of y'all maybe have heard of that, but the founder of LeTourneau was a guy by the name of R.G. LeTourneau. And I remember hearing his giving story. He was a guy who had like over 300 different patents and made all these millions of dollars in like this earth moving equipment. But he realized very early that all the money he had was God's, and he wanted to be in a business relationship with God. And it's like, hey, I don't need everything. And so instead of me tithing 10%, I'm going to tithe 90%. So I'll keep the 10, and you're going, I could live on $1 million pretty easily too. But it was his heart posture that he said, hey, I don't need this. And even Morgan sent me a sermon yesterday from David Platt talking about giving. And he shared a story on there about John Wesley. And I'd forgotten his story. But I think, and I wrote a note, it says, John Wesley, he was making 28 pounds a year was his salary as a professor at Oxford University. And so he committed that year to say, basically, God, anything that I make over 28 pounds is yours, because I can live on 28 pounds. So everything else, so guess what? The next year, his salary doubled. So he could have taken the 60 pounds and went, I've got an extra 32 pounds. I can go buy a bigger house, and all the things that we think of. Hey, I've got this landfall of money. But John Wesley instead says, hey, I'm giving it all away. So for the rest of his life, he only lived on that 28 pounds every year. Like, this is all I need to live. And he would give away the rest. And it says, part of his journey, his salary ended up growing to 1,400 pounds per month. And he would still give it all away. He gave away some 30,000 pounds in the millions of dollars in today's economy. You like that song? Our God is an awesome God, he reigns. Who sang that song? Rich Mullins. Rich Mullins was an artist. And so when I think about Tay-Tay and our culture of, so how much is Taylor Swift worth? I don't know. She's making a lot of money. I remember her giving like bonuses to her 18-wheeler drivers after her Eras, tour. This is not in the notes, sorry. But so here's somebody who's making a lot of money, and she's benevolent. She's been giving it to those people who've helped her out. But Rich Mullins, who wrote Our God is an Awesome God, when as a Christian artist, he never knew what he made. So he told his accountant, I don't want to know what I make. I basically want you to give me the average median income at that time, what that salary is. At the time, it was $25,000 a year. He said, give me that, give the rest away. So he gave to charities, he gave to the church, he gave to the reservation out where he was living and serving the children. But these are some guys who, they understood money. It wasn't about being greedy. Number two, the rich man was selfish. So here's three people who were not living selfishly, because we can all take our money, you like that language? But the reality is that we know that all of the money that we have, that we say is our money, is really his money, because God owns it all. God gave me health. God gave me the resources that I have. And just like we saw with Hurricane Harvey, very quickly God can take things away. But this rich man was greedy, he was selfish, and he was foolish. Listen to this guy's logic. Soul, he speaks to himself, soul, relax, eat, drink, and be merry. He thought he had it all. He thought he had arrived. It just shows his character that he didn't get it. He didn't understand that he was truly blessed to be a blessing to others. And so that's the words we heard a while ago in verse 20. But God changes everything. Because in that moment, the man's life is going to come to an abrupt end that night with no chance to make it right, with no opportunity to fix things, to give money away, to spend the money that he stored up, to say, oh yeah, give the money to so-and-so. This fool, life's demanded of him that night because he was selfish, greedy, and foolish. If you continue reading on in chapter 12, down in verse 33, it's the end of this passage we talked about a couple of weeks ago, talked about anxiety and worry. And you see here in verse 33 where Jesus says, sell your possessions and give to the needy. Provide yourselves with money bags that do not grow old, with a treasure in the heavens that does not fail, where no thief approaches and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The context of this, thinking about anxiety. Some of us have anxiety over, I don't have enough money. I need more. Some of us have anxiety over, I've got too much money, and what do I need to do with it? How do I invest it wisely? And then you look at the stock market, and you're going, no. I mean, money creates anxiety in different ways. But the challenge is that everything that we have is the Lord's, and we are called to live. The opposite of greedy is to be generous. That's the kind of person we want to be. Instead of greedy, it's mine, mine, mine. Instead of selfishness, is we want to be generous. And I saw this several years ago. I think it's even on our website somewhere. It's called the Generosity Ladder. And it's more of a New Testament picture of giving. Because when you think about the Old Testament, we see that word tithe, which is a tenth. So we think about, hey, I need to give God 10% of my money. And the rest of it is mine. No, it's all his. But we tend to live like that way. Hey, let me give God his 10% and then I'm off the hook. But a generous giver is this John Wesley type of giving. It's this Rich Mullins. It's like, hey, God, I only need this. Everything else is yours. That's generosity. And so some of us sitting here going, but you haven't seen my bills. You haven't seen my credit card. I don't have any money to give. So maybe you've never given to the Lord. Maybe that's not part of a discipline in your life. Students, you're going, I don't have a job. I mean, where do I can give mom and dad's money. I remember we were over there Sunday morning where your kids are rummaging through your purse to pull out dollars and pennies to put in the plate. I remember that as a kid. But part of generosity is if you've never given before, start. Just give something to the Lord. It could be give $1. It could be $100. It could be $1,000. Whatever it is, God say, hey, just start giving. And this generosity ladder, then the next step is, hey, once you've given, well, now you give regularly. Like, hey, I want to give once a month. And you just start giving on a regular basis, whatever that amount is. And so the next step, and once again, it's this progression, this journey. It's like, okay, well, I've given, now give it on a regular basis. Well, I can't give 10% because my budget will not support that. I'm going to give 1%. And then maybe next year, and I've heard of people, actually somebody shared their testimony with, hey, we just every year we would up it a percentage. And they didn't stop when they got the 10%. Because for some of us, we're going, hey, I got the 10%. I can afford this, but I still want all the other stuff. But generosity is so much bigger than that. And so we look at this rich fool, the story of him. In verse 21, it says, so the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. That's what we want to be. We want to be rich toward God, that he has everything. We want him to have the use of our car, even knowing somebody might spill red Gatorade in the back of it. I mean, it's his car. We want God to have our house for people to come over and to mess things up. I remember when we first got this beautiful new sanctuary and after all the renovations, I wanted to just come in here and pour Dr. Pepper on the carpet. You're going, ugh. Just because sometimes we can treat things like a museum. It's meant to be used. Not that we want to destroy and be disrespectful. We want to be good stewards. But sometimes we can definitely hold on to things pretty tightly, especially money. It's one of those things at church you're going, man, I can't believe he's talking about money. People have left the church over these kind of sermons. Like, dude, you can talk about stuff, but just don't talk about my money. So what I'm telling you to do is you do what God tells you to do. And so you're going to give to him, not to me. That's why we don't know what you give here at the church. I mean, obviously, ladies who count the money know, but I don't know what you give. God knows. I remember seeing that sermon one time where as they were passing the baskets in the church, the pastor went down and started taking the envelopes and started looking at them. And you can just see people's feathers getting ruffled across the crowd. And then he looks up and is like, why do y'all care what I know? It's like, he's the one that matters. I'm just a guy. And so it doesn't matter what we all think. You just got to be integrous and generous to the Lord as he calls you, because we are all rich. And so I praise God for the way he blesses us so that we can be a blessing to others.